Deep in the heart of Silver Pines Forest, hidden beneath dense trees and tangled roots, lay a cave no one dared enter. Local legends told of its terrible depths, a place where the sunlight never touched and where no animal would go. Children in the nearby town whispered tales of people who entered the cave and were never seen again, their names fading into ghostly memory. And for most, these stories were enough to keep them far away. But 15-year-old Will wasn't like most. His curiosity ran too deep, and tales of a haunted cave only intrigued him more. One autumn evening, he decided to find it for himself, determined to prove that all the stories were just that, stories. Armed with a flashlight, some water, and his dad's old camping knife, he set off into the forest. It didn't take long to find it. The cave mouth was hidden by hanging vines, like a secret entrance to another world. As Will stepped closer, a gust of cold, stale air greeted him, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, a faint, metallic tang. He ignored it and pressed forward, clicking on his flashlight as he stepped inside. The walls were jagged and narrow, pressing in around him as he descended further. The light from his flashlight was quickly swallowed by the pitch darkness around him, and the sounds of the forest faded to silence. All he could hear was his own breathing, louder than ever, echoing through the empty space. Just as he was about to turn back, he noticed something glinting in the light, scratches on the wall. They weren't natural rock formations, they looked like marks left by hands, dozens of them, scratched in patterns that stretched all along the walls of the tunnel. He shuddered, but his curiosity wouldn't let him turn around just yet. Deeper still, he noticed a small alcove with strange symbols drawn in dark, faded paint, or was it something else? The symbols formed circles and spirals that seemed to lead farther down a narrow passageway. That was when he heard it, the faint sound of whispering. It was low and indistinct, like voices far away, murmuring just out of reach. "Hello?" he called, his voice quivering despite his efforts to stay calm. There was no reply, but the whispers grew louder, shifting into a dissonant melody of overlapping voices. They seemed to chant his name. "Will, come closer," his pulse quickened, and he glanced behind him, but the path back was shrouded in darkness. He was alone, or so he thought. With every step, the chanting grew louder, the voices more desperate, more angry. They spoke of betrayal, of promises broken, of darkness that had never left. As he turned a corner, his flashlight flickered, casting brief shadows that looked almost human, tall and gaunt, their faces frozen in silent screams. He stumbled, his breath catching, but he pushed on, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. At last, he reached a wide, circular chamber, the heart of the cave. In its center was a pit, so deep his flashlight couldn't reveal the bottom. But what made his blood run cold was the realization that hundreds of handprints covered the walls around the pit, all pointing downward. These were no symbols or natural formations. These were desperate marks of people clawing to escape. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him, slow and shuffling, as though someone, or something, was coming closer. His flashlight flickered again, the beam barely strong enough to pierce the darkness. He didn't dare turn around. The air grew colder, and he felt a breath on the back of his neck, freezing him in place. Then, in the dim light, he saw fingers, long, skeletal fingers, curling over the edge of the pit. Slowly, a figure began to pull itself up. It was pale, with hollow, empty eyes, its skin stretched tightly over its bones, its face twisted into a grin too wide for any human. It stared at him, unblinking, reaching out with its bony fingers. Panicking, Will scrambled backward, his foot catching on a rock. He stumbled, almost losing his balance. The creature dragged itself closer, its hand now inches away, its mouth opening in a silent scream. At the last second, Will turned and sprinted back up the tunnel, his flashlight barely illuminating the path as he ran. The whispers rose in a furious chorus, pleading, demanding, following him with every step. He could feel the cold presence just behind him, a relentless force, determined to drag him back to that pit. When he finally burst out of the cave, the sunlight felt blinding. He stumbled into the open, gasping for air. Behind him, the cave was silent once more, hidden in shadows as though nothing had happened. Shaken, Will ran all the way home, vowing never to speak of what he'd seen. But every now and then, in the silence of the night, he would still hear the whispers calling his name, beckoning him back to the depths of the dark, hungry cave.